Okay. So we are just about live. Let me see if anyone's on the Twitter. All right. Not yet, but that's okay. So let's go here. Kind of be going off my notes. If anyone's on the Twitter live. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Weekly Prophet. My name is Jack Hayes, and I sincerely appreciate all of you beautiful souls tuning in. Now, for those of you that don't know, I don't know how long you've been following the show, but I've been at this. I first introduced the show when I was about 19, 20 years old. I think it was during COVID-19 when I was back home from college. And I got this idea to launch the Weekly Prophet. And it was kind of my first introduction to the creator space. It was like my first, this is to get this seen, you have to put it on social media, right? Like it seemed, even for me at 19, 20 years old, I just had only used it as the casual user. As many people who are listening, I probably used all the platforms. Like I was just the casual, like post every 3 months type person. And then I launched this podcast and I'm like, people want to hear it. They have to see it. So we dive into the creator space and you go down that rabbit hole. So, I experienced the whole imposter syndrome, feeling like I hadn't built anything worth talking about, just all these random questions that pop into your head as to why you can't do it. But I love the idea. That's why the Weekly Prophet name stayed. Our kind of tagline at the time was opportunity awaits. And I think a lot of the products we're building now that we've reintroduced it, we reintroduced it in May of 2022, so about 15 months or so later, right after I graduated college. I was in Austin, Texas, and I was with my sister, and I was like, you know what was something that I loved to do that provided value for other people that maybe one day I could get paid for, but that's not the end goal. And maybe passively it would create opportunity for me. And that was the podcast. That was the Weekly Prophet. And that was creating content. Ultimately, that's kind of the realization I came to in the past year. So I would say around this time last year, about March of last year, yes, I was creating the podcast, but I didn't necessarily consider myself a full-time content creator. But the beginning of that year hit and I was like, you know what? I need to take this, see if I can do it seriously for a year. So January of that year, I was like, you know what? January of this past year, 2023. I'd been out of college roughly seven months at this point, and I again came back to the podcast as I need to be consistent with this. This is what I like to do. We had a good run the first that last 7 months, and I was like, okay, this is really kind of reintroducing it, and took me back down the creator rabbit hole. And then I looked at the businesses I was starting, and I was like, okay, these need content as well. Let's start connecting the podcast bridge with content. But also centered around the business, people in my industry, people that could be part of this, audience that I want to build. So yeah, I would say it's been about a year since I started making content seriously. If you look on YouTube, roughly, I think it's 400 something videos to get to 300 subscribers. And today we're really going to run through kind of the 3 main things I learned. Like I said, I'm going to keep these podcast episodes, especially when they're solo, short and sweet. If anyone's tuned in on Twitter right now, I sincerely appreciate you. I'm pretty much reading off my notes, so I can't totally see it. But we're just going to kind of run through the 3 main things I learned. Basically running through the highest impact niche. So where I found the most bang for my buck in terms of focused attention. What I think about imposter syndrome and kind of dealing with feeling weird about creating content, what that part of the process was like after I was consistent for a few months. And then how you can maximize content. So yes, maybe you're one of those people who understands the value, but you don't want to create it all the time. And you're watching these creators and you think they're sitting down every day, recording a video, posting it to 10 different platforms, and then they're waking up every day and doing that. And of course, if you think about that in hindsight, if you're being told that's what you need to do to grow your business, you're like, well, that's a lot of work to sit down, record that many videos, post to that many platforms, do all that. Well, as somebody who did think that initially and thought that's how everyone was doing it and spent the last year experimenting and being like, how do I optimize this process? I found the secret and I'm here to save you, and I'm going to give it to you completely, absolutely, completely for free. So that's really what we're going over. And then kind of one fourth and final thing. So I know it's 3 tips, but also a fourth one that I think was important. So what I've learned 1 year in as a pretty much full-time creator. This is what I do. It's for my business. I launch the podcast. It helps kind of funnel that. And that's just, this is really all I do. So the most viral, highest impact niche you can create content for is actually you. I didn't become confident in telling my story until I spent time seriously analyzing it, thinking about where I was relative to where I'd been, and identifying the lessons learned that I felt applied to the masses. So it really became starting a habit of asking myself the right questions and reassessing week after week. Why do you guys think I'd write almost every single day, keeping track of the days last year, because I wanted to assess where I was at each and every day. And it forced me to ask the right questions. So this is where I identified lessons that I felt I could apply to the masses. The highest rated podcasts, most viewed blogs, and best performing reels I put out were my most instinctive and unique ideas. It was absolutely no surprise. When I got the instinct I saw Arlen posted, "Hey, I'm accepting new podcast requests, send an email to my manager and see what we can do." Jumped on it immediately. 2 weeks later, that opportunity sprouts itself and I get to provide awesome value to my audience. Same thing with a lot of the other guests. These are guys I pulled value from and I instinctively just reached out, and by the power of the universe and being consistent with the content I was putting out, those opportunities presented themselves. So double down on authenticity. Do what is you. Think about the problems and your experience. What problems have you had to solve for yourself that you now have really understand and could potentially show someone else? That's what you want to focus your content around. And, maybe the products, just by documenting the journey, not to take too much of a tangent, but a lot of people are listening to this being like, well, I don't have an online product. I don't have an online coaching program. I can't launch that, yada, yada, yada. But they also haven't asked themselves these questions. They haven't asked themselves, what am I good at? What problems have I had to solve for myself, etc. And when you start documenting the journey, and if you want to create valuable content, you have to answer those questions and then provide the answers, kind of like I'm doing now. Then those answers will start to reveal themselves in physical form, if that makes sense. So everything that now I want to kind of transition into imposter syndrome, and like all these imposter syndrome kind of starts with feeling weird, right? Like we don't want to make content, so we think it's to be weird and interpreted. And honestly, when you really focus on the definition of weird, like everything will be classified in weird until everything the world hasn't seen before will be classified as weird until it's so widely respected that the world simply can't live without it. So how does the world know it can't live without it? Well, if you think about your current friend group and how it came together, this example I love to use. The only reason you have friends is because you decided to let strangers know who you are and the value you bring. Then you recognize, acknowledge, and appreciated the value they brought to you. You told them those things because they presented ideas or energy to you that you wanted to present those authentic ideas to them. And when it comes to content, your audience is that stranger. So yes, it's going to be weird, that initial first introduction, that initial first video, that initial first month of even creating videos, seeing, oh, who's my audience? Who's like engaging with this? You won't believe who comes out of the woodworks to tell you, how much they appreciate what you're doing. And it's just, it all came from you overcoming thinking it was going to be weird and understanding that a lot of times people will see that as bravery and courage. And those are the feelings you want to focus on. The fact that you're even putting yourself out there is creating something super powerful. So it's going to be weird until it's widely respected. And the only way it can become widely respected is by letting people know about it. Guys, there's 8 billion people out there. I promise you 100 people will find out what you're doing and what you believe in and, agree with your mission. And this is kind of how you can get around high value people. And that's not what this video is about, but kind of going down there. So your audience is that stranger. Replicate the process in the content you create. Think about the stranger, who you want to talk to. Recognize, acknowledge, and appreciate the value they bring to the world. And then by understanding who you are and the unique way you can help them, because of what we did earlier in asking ourselves the right question, you communicate that and you find out the ways you can help them. Do it often and do it to the masses. So communicate that in your content. Hey, I'm I'm currently helping this niche solve this problem, and this is the result I've gotten for this person in the past, if you've done that, right? But when it comes to just creating content, maybe you're in the personal development niche, like I said, documenting the journey, personal development, that kind of go hand in hand. That's a realm you can go to. The personal development, people you're going to be developing are people who've had similar experiences to you. So whether you're a college student, grad student, maybe you're studying full-time, maybe you're an online entrepreneur full-time, maybe you're doing both, like I was for a little period, maybe you're an athlete and you're doing it and you're in school. Triple is very tough and difficult, and I respect all of you going through it. You just have to find time to communicate that value you're bringing in this experience you've had, and those people that you can help will start to show themselves. But it doesn't happen instantly. It happens. Think about how long going back to the friends result or the friends example, right? Like, think about how long your best friendships actually took before you super trusted those people. It's the same with your content. Your audience should be your friends. I always say my best I want to manage, like I said, I've been on this goal to add 20 new clients to the business that I'm working one-on-one with within the first 100 days of the year. And again, I like to provide updates on these. We're about 5 to 6 away, and we're 40 days away from that 100-day goal. Ultimately, though, I want to create good revenue for these people and become friends with these people and network with these people. So it's like, yes, some of them may have come from my audience, but most of them came from me reaching out with my LinkedIn audience or this audience or XYZ. Again, we're about to transition into that, but keep that in mind. If you look at these people as your friends, when you reach out to them, it doesn't sound salesy. It sounds like you might want to make a genuine connection. Your friends, your clients, your audience, they all go hand in hand, and it'll make your life a lot more fulfilling. So this becomes a beautiful transition into the third thing I learned, experimented with, got paid to do, and told all my friends about, which is automating the process for getting that message to the masses, to those massive strangers that you want to become amazing friends with. Now, I'm not perfect, but over the course of the year, I learned that one tweet can become a LinkedIn post, that can become a LinkedIn blog, that can become a podcast topic, that can become a YouTube video, that can become a short form YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, tweet, and LinkedIn post. Even better, you create all that content, right? What if you could create 60 pieces? What if you knew a way you could create 60 pieces of content within 2 hours of your time a month and have a fully running, consistently scheduled podcast, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channel? So you'll have a fully running personal brand, and then you could also launch a podcast if you just recorded content 2 hours a month. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about there. The process of creating that really isn't the hard part. Like you literally can. That's what I kind of experienced over this last year. Yes, I had the podcast and I take the branding seriously, but you don't necessarily have to. A lot of it, when I started, it was like, here's how I can be consistent with content, right? Create the name, the weekly profit, and commit every day. You don't need to think like that. We're going to all think differently. But the main premise was, if I record an hour of content, if I record 30 minutes to 60-minute podcast episode, that I can get 20 to 30 clips out of that for me and the guest. And that's a clear value exchange. So I know, not everyone's in the podcast space, and that totally makes sense. It was just kind of an easy way to create content. You don't have to think of it like that, but you could record in this strategy, which I'm kind of about to go through. So the process of creating it isn't the hard part. I want to reiterate that. You can literally tell AI your strengths and weaknesses and experience and literally find out your unique value proposition, then ask it to create a 2-hour podcast conversation template. Then the next step, call your best friend or colleague to talk shop with you. Simply do it once a month, and you can create up to 10 12-minute episodes and 60 30-second clips, and this will allow you to post once every day, because there's about 60 days in 2 months, roughly, give or take. You can post once a day, and then that's the simple formula, right? If you record 2 hours at a time, then, if it's relative to that 2-month time frame based on where you're at in the journey, where you're at in business, whatever your intention is, then create that and use the AI tools that I'll put in the description at the end, and you can help those kind of automate the process. Or you can call me and hire me to do it. And that's an unshameable plug, because this is my podcast, and it's a process we've used to help really automate the process for everyone else so that they can focus on sales and product development, because those are the leverage moving tasks that really you should have dialed in before even hopping on the content wave. unless you're documenting the journey. Like I said, kind of not to contradict myself, but depends on what your intention is, right? And honestly, that's it. Again, I'll put this in the description so you guys can all run through that. I don't want this podcast to run too long. But the last thing I'd say is I learned how rare it is for the world to actively message negativity towards you. I made over 1,000 pieces of content last year and can count on one hand the negative feedback or DMs I got. Moral of the story, nobody cares. And those that do like to tell people why. So make it clear and obvious and be consistent. That is the whole theme of this, and what I learned in the last year was to make my mission clear, obvious, and simple, and to be consistent in how I portray and tell the world that mission, and also actively building that mission. I think I'll kind of go here before I end this out, as my dog likes to bark in every episode. There was periods when I was taking content seriously where it got hard to find the balance between building the business and putting time into content. And that's why I'm so big on living and working in seasons. So I think you should have a week maybe where you focus strictly on content and let that be your content for the next 1 to 2 months, right? But then have a week or 3 weeks, or like I'm putting in 100 days right now straight on the business, sales, marketing, etc., to get your systems dialed in and get your retainers on board, and then reinvest some money into content. So yeah, if you want any one-to-one strategy on how I recommend doing that, I currently run a one-person business and invest less than $500 a month to produce over $60,000 a year. So you can just DM me, Jack Hayes, everywhere. I love you guys. Thanks for checking in with me, and have a great rest of your week. Peace.